Welcome, everyone. We're diving into the world of Gelong Thubten, a Buddhist monk, and his really fascinating perspective on happiness.
Yeah, and we'll be looking at a talk he gave about, how to apply these ancient practices like meditation and compassion to our modern lives.
Right, and what I think is so interesting is that, he wasn't always a monk. He had this really kind of crazy lifestyle in New York before a health crisis led him to meditation.
Yeah, he was only 21 and having these panic attacks so severe that he actually thought he was having a heart attack.
Wow, that's intense. So how did he end up going from panic attacks in New York to a Buddhist monastery?
Well, it's really interesting. It was actually his mother who, during his recovery, gave him some books about meditation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he was really drawn to this idea that, you can actually train your mind to, overcome suffering. So he decided to spend a year at a Buddhist monastery.
A year? Wow, that's quite a commitment.
Yeah.
So did he find what he was looking for?
He did. He definitely did. And so much more. He talks about how, he arrived at the monastery and was just kind of thrown into the deep end right away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, robes, shaved head, and surrounded by all these, experienced monks, he suddenly felt completely out of his element.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, and he even talks about wandering into the meditation room and just having no idea where to even begin.
Yeah, I can imagine that feeling. It's like being the only one in a room who doesn't speak the language or something.
Totally, totally. And it seems like this initial discomfort actually played a key role in his journey. He describes this moment during a 2-hour group meditation session where he was just gripped by panic and didn't know what to do.
Oh, gosh.
But instead of fleeing, he just stayed with that discomfort and realized that he needed to learn how to just be present with it.
So from resisting the discomfort to leaning into it.
Yeah.
That's quite a shift.
Yeah, it was a huge turning point for him. He eventually took lifelong vows, dedicating his life to these practices. And what's so remarkable is that he emphasizes that you don't have to become a monk to benefit from them. His teachings are for everyone.
That's great. So let's dive into those teachings. What did he learn about meditation that was so transformative for him?
Well, he starts by debunking this common misconception that a lot of us have about meditation.
Oh, yeah.
He says straight up that meditation is not about clearing your mind.
Wait, but isn't emptying your mind and finding inner peace like the whole point of meditation?
That's what we often think, yeah. But Thubten says it's not about achieving this blank slate. It's about changing your relationship to your thoughts.
Okay, so how do we change that relationship?
He uses this really powerful metaphor. He says your mind is the sky and your thoughts are clouds passing through.
Okay.
So just as the sky remains vast and unchanging, regardless of the clouds, you are bigger than your thoughts.
I love that imagery. It really puts those intrusive thoughts into perspective. They're not permanent fixtures, just these temporary visitors.
Exactly. And realizing that can be incredibly liberating. You don't have to get swept away by every thought or emotion that comes up.
Right.
You can just observe them with a sense of detachment.
So if it's not about eradicating thoughts, what is the aim of meditation?
Well, Thubten breaks it down into these 3 simple, repeatable steps: breathing, noticing, and returning.
Okay.
So first, you just focus on your breath. Then, inevitably, your mind wanders.
Right.
The key is to notice when this happens. And he even says that realizing your mind has wandered is a moment of success, not failure.
How is getting distracted a success? That seems kind of counterintuitive.
It's a success because you've become aware. You've caught your mind in the act of wandering.
Right.
And this awareness is the foundation of gaining control over your mind. And that leads to the 3rd step, returning. Just gently guiding your attention back to your breath without judgment or frustration.
It sounds simple enough, but I imagine it takes practice to really master those 3 steps.
It does. And that's where Thubten's concept of meditating badly comes in. He encourages us to just let go of the pressure to do it perfectly.
Meditating badly. I've never heard a meditation teacher say that before. What does he mean by that?
He means embracing the fact that, your mind will wander, you will get distracted.
Right.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
The key is to approach meditation with acceptance, not judgment.
So instead of getting frustrated when we get distracted, we should just see it as part of the process.
Exactly. He even admits that he used to meditate like a drug addict at one point, chasing the specific feeling.
Really?
Yeah, but it only led to more frustration. True progress, he says, comes from just showing up, breathing, noticing, and returning again and again and again.
So it's about the consistency of the practice, not achieving some perfect state of bliss.
Exactly. And as we practice this, something really remarkable begins to happen. We start to cultivate compassion.
And that's a great point to pick up after a quick break. We'll be back soon to explore the power of compassion with Gelong Thubten. And we're back, ready to explore compassion, the heart of Gelong Thubten's teachings. It's such a powerful concept, but I think, it can be easily misunderstood.
Yeah.
Is it simply about being, nice to people?
It goes much deeper than that. He describes compassion as having these two key aspects, internal and external.
Okay.
So let's start with internal compassion. It's about developing this gentle and accepting relationship with your own thoughts and emotions.
So instead of criticizing ourselves for having, negative thoughts or feelings, we just practice acceptance.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about recognizing that, we're not our thoughts. Remember that sky and clouds metaphor?
Right.
We allow those clouds, the difficult thoughts and emotions to just pass through without judgment or resistance.
It's like offering ourselves the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a close friend who's struggling.
Exactly. And as we cultivate that internal compassion, it naturally extends outward to others. That's the external aspect, the genuine intention to actually benefit others.
I'm curious about that transition from internal to external compassion. How does that happen? Does simply being kinder to ourselves automatically make us more compassionate towards others?
That's a good question. He doesn't necessarily see it as this automatic process. He emphasizes that compassion shouldn't just be a feeling. It needs to be an action.
So it's not enough to just, think kind thoughts about others. We have to actually do something to benefit them.
That's right. And he actually highlights some research by Tanya Singer, a neuroscientist who's studied the effects of compassion-based meditation on the brain. And her research shows that this type of meditation actually activates the motor cortex, the part of the brain responsible for intention and action.
So there's a neurological basis for this connection between compassion and action.
There is, yeah. And this leads to his emphasis on bringing mindfulness into daily life, not just during formal meditation practice. He encourages us to practice what he calls micro moments of mindfulness throughout the day.
Micro moments of mindfulness. What are those? And how do they connect to compassion?
They're exactly what they sound like. Just these small moments of bringing awareness to whatever you're doing.
Okay.
So, it could be as simple as paying full attention to the sensations of brushing your teeth, washing your hands, or even just waiting in line at the grocery store. The key is to intentionally tune in to the present moment.
So instead of letting our minds wander to our to-do list or replaying conversations from earlier in the day, we just anchor ourselves in the present.
Yes.
I can see how that could help to cultivate a sense of peace and presence, but I'm still not quite clear on the connection to compassion.
Well, he suggests using these micro moments as opportunities to practice compassion. Especially in situations that typically trigger stress and impatience,
You mean like being stuck in traffic or dealing with a frustrating coworker?
Exactly. Those are the moments when mindfulness becomes most powerful. It's easy to be peaceful and present when everything's going smoothly. But it's in those moments of discomfort that we have a real chance to put our practice to the test.
So instead of getting annoyed or frustrated, we can use those moments to practice patience and understanding.
Yes. He even compares it to lifting weights at the gym. You need the resistance to build strength. Each time you choose to respond to a challenging situation with mindfulness instead of reactivity, you're strengthening your compassion muscle, so to speak.
I like that analogy. It makes mindfulness feel more active and empowering. Less like passive meditation.
It is empowering. It's about cultivating what he calls independent happiness. The kind of happiness that doesn't depend on external circumstances.
That sounds amazing. To be able to access that inner peace and contentment no matter what life throws at you. Did he share any examples of how he applied these principles in his own life?
He did, yeah. He shared that he used to be terrified of public speaking.
Oh, really?
Even to the point of tears. Which was surprising to me, considering that he was actually an actor before becoming a monk.
That is surprising. You'd think acting would make you comfortable being in front of an audience.
Well, he explained that acting is different because you're playing a character, hiding behind a persona.
Okay.
But when he had to speak as himself, he felt completely exposed and vulnerable.
So how did he overcome this fear? Did meditation help?
He said he used the same techniques he used for, dealing with traffic jams and long queues.
Okay.
He would intentionally bring himself into a mindful state right before and even during his talks.
So instead of getting swept up in his anxiety, he used those moments to just practice being present.
Yes. He would focus on his breath, observe his thoughts and feelings without judgment, and gently redirect his attention to the present moment.
And over time, his fear diminished.
He said that eventually public speaking actually became relaxing for him.
Wow.
He even compared it to getting a massage.
That's incredible. From panic attacks and stage fright to experiencing public speaking as a relaxing massage, that's quite a testament to the power of these practices. Did he talk about applying mindfulness to any other areas of life?
He did. He spoke about the role of mindfulness in relationships.
Okay.
Specifically in the context of forgiveness.
Oh, interesting.
He believes that forgiveness is a skill that can be cultivated through meditation and reflection.
Forgiveness is such a loaded word. It can bring up so much resistance,
Right.
especially when we've been deeply hurt or betrayed.
Yeah.
What was his approach to forgiveness?
He acknowledged that forgiveness can be incredibly difficult, especially when we're consumed by anger or resentment or hurt. He said that our minds tend to get stuck in those painful emotions, replaying the same stories over and over again.
And that's where meditation comes in, to help us break free from those repetitive thought patterns.
Yes, exactly. He said that even if we're not directly meditating on the hurt we feel, the practice itself can help us to loosen the grip of those negative emotions.
Okay.
We begin to see those thoughts and feelings as temporary visitors, not the defining reality of who we are or what happened.
So we create some space between ourselves and the pain.
Exactly. And that space allows for a new perspective to emerge, a perspective of understanding and forgiveness. But he emphasized that creating this space is not always enough.
Okay.
He also stressed the importance of reflection.
What kind of reflection is he talking about?
He talked about something called analytical meditation, which is essentially about thinking constructively about a particular topic.
So it's not just about passively observing our breath. We're actively engaging with our thoughts and emotions in a deliberate way.
Yes. And in the context of forgiveness, the topic for reflection is the person we're struggling to forgive.
Right.
He encouraged us to try to develop a deeper understanding of the human condition.
And what did he mean by that?
He meant recognizing that we are all flawed, imperfect beings. We all make mistakes.
Right.
We all act out of fear or insecurity, and sometimes we hurt others, even unintentionally.
So it's about acknowledging that the person who hurt us is also human, also capable of making mistakes.
Right. And he went a step further, suggesting we reflect on times when we might have acted similarly in the past.
Okay.
He said that often the very qualities we find abhorrent in others are the very qualities we also struggle with within ourselves.
That's a challenging but important point.
Right.
It's easy to judge others without recognizing our own capacity for the same shortcomings. Did he give any examples of this?
He did, yeah. He shared a very personal anecdote about struggling to forgive his father, who he felt had been emotionally abusive.
Oh, yeah.
And during his 4-year silent retreat, he spent a lot of time doing compassion meditations,
Okay.
Visualizing his father and trying to send him love and forgiveness.
I can only imagine how difficult that must have been to face those painful memories and emotions in the silence of a retreat.
It sounds incredibly challenging. And he said that one evening during one of these meditations, he had this really profound realization.
Oh, wow.
He suddenly thought and felt, oh, I do that too. He realized that when he felt afraid or insecure, he would withdraw from others,
Okay.
becoming distant and cold, much like his father had done.
It's amazing how self-awareness can emerge in those moments of quiet reflection.
It is, yeah.
Hmm.
And that realization allowed him to access this deeper level of forgiveness, not just for his father, but for himself as well. He saw that they were both imperfect beings struggling with their own inner demons.
That's a beautiful example of how self-compassion and forgiveness are intertwined. It's not just about letting go of anger towards someone else. It's also about letting go of the judgment we hold toward ourselves.
Beautifully said, yeah. And that's the essence of his message. True compassion begins with understanding. Understanding that we're all connected, that we're all in this together, and that we all deserve kindness and forgiveness, flaws and all.
His talk seems like such a rich exploration of these ideas. Did he have time for questions from the audience?
He did, yeah. And there were a few exchanges that I found particularly interesting.
I always love a good Q&A session.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to hear how different people connect with the material. What questions stood out to you?
Well, one question that came up was about about the distinction between meditation and mindfulness.
Okay.
You know, the audience member wanted to know if those terms are interchangeable
Right.
or if they have distinct meanings.
That's a great question. I think a lot of people use those terms interchangeably, but I'm curious to hear his take on it.
Yeah, he acknowledged that it's a complex discussion, even within the mindfulness movement itself. But his response was quite simple. He said, forget it, just do it.
I love that. Straight to the point.
He pointed out that whether you call it meditation or mindfulness, the core technique of bringing your attention to the present moment is the same. He seemed less concerned with labels and more interested in the actual practice.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that sometimes we can get too caught up in semantics and miss the essence of what we're exploring.
Absolutely. Another question that sparked an interesting discussion was about the concept of non-striving.
Right.
Which is often emphasized in Buddhist teachings.
Right.
The audience member wanted to know how non-striving fits in with having goals and aspirations in life.
That's a good question. It's easy to misinterpret non-striving as passivity or apathy. Like we should just give up on our dreams and ambitions.
Right. And his response was very nuanced. He explained that during meditation there's this paradox of both goal and non-goal.
Right.
You know, the goal is to cultivate compassion and benefit others.
Right.
But we have to let go of striving for any particular outcome or experience during the practice itself.
Yeah.
You know, we simply accept whatever arises in the present moment.
So in meditation, we set an intention, but then surrender to the process.
Exactly. And he emphasized that non-striving in meditation doesn't mean giving up on goals in life. He actually said that practicing mindfulness can help us to clarify our purpose and become more effective in pursuing our goals.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If we're constantly caught up in mental chatter and reactivity, it's hard to focus on what truly matters.
Right. He also made the point that people who meditate regularly often become more compassionate and service-oriented in their actions. You know, their actions are driven by a deeper sense of purpose, not just ego-driven ambition.
So it's like mindfulness helps us to align our actions with our values, leading to a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Exactly. There was one more question that I thought was particularly relevant to our discussion of compassion and forgiveness.
Okay.
The audience member asked him to describe the difference between feeling compassion towards oneself and feeling sorry for oneself.
That's a great question. I think it can be easy to get caught in a cycle of self-pity without actually addressing the root of our suffering.
He agreed. He said that self-compassion is about having this direct, loving relationship with the parts of ourselves that we don't like.
Okay.
Or that cause us pain. You know, it's about gently acknowledging those difficult thoughts and emotions without judgment or resistance.
So instead of berating ourselves for our perceived flaws or mistakes, we meet those parts of ourselves with kindness and understanding.
Yes.
Oh.
He contrasted this with feeling sorry for oneself, which he seemed to view as a more passive and potentially self-indulgent state.
Yeah.
He emphasized that self-compassion is an active practice. It's about making friends with the parts of ourselves that we've rejected or pushed away.
It's about turning toward our pain, not away from it. I love that. It seems like such a crucial foundation for both personal growth and compassionate action in the world.
I agree. And with that caution, the Q&A session came to an end, but the event organizer actually offered this really beautiful closing reflection.
Oh.
That I think perfectly captured the essence of his message.
I'm curious to hear what they shared.
They shared a quote that had stayed with them. They said, "The people who are in need of the most love often show it in the least loving of ways."
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah.
It reminds us that hurtful behavior is often a reflection of inner pain and suffering.
Exactly. And the organizer went on to say that if we can try to empathize with the pain and trauma that others have experienced, it can help us to understand their behavior more compassionately.
It's a beautiful reminder to approach others with curiosity and empathy, especially when their actions are hurtful or difficult.
It is. And with that closing reflection, the talk came to an end.
What a profound and inspiring deep dive into Gelong Thubten's teachings on compassion and mindfulness. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of his wisdom.
I agree. There's so much to unpack and reflect on.
And so much to apply to our own lives. I'm already thinking about those those micro moments of mindfulness bring on those traffic jams and long queues.
I'm with you. What stands out to you the most from his talk? What resonated most deeply?
I think it was his emphasis on the interconnectedness of compassion and happiness. He demonstrated so beautifully how cultivating compassion, both for ourselves and others, is not just a moral imperative, but a path to genuine, lasting happiness.
That's so true. It's not about chasing fleeting pleasures or external validation. It's about nurturing this deep sense of inner peace and connection that radiates outward.
Exactly. And I think what makes his teaching so powerful is that they're grounded in both ancient wisdom and modern science. He's not just offering feel-good platitudes. He's sharing practices that have been shown to rewire our brains for greater happiness and well-being.
It's like he's offering us this practical roadmap to navigate the complexities of modern life with greater grace and compassion and resilience.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty incredible gift.
It is. But before we wrap things up, I'd love to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder, something that wasn't explicitly addressed in his talk.
Okay.
That builds on his message of compassion and understanding.
I love that idea. Okay, here's someone to chew on. We've talked a lot about forgiveness. But what about those situations where forgiveness feels impossible, where the hurt is so deep,
right,
the betrayal so profound
Yeah.
that it seems like forgiveness would be a betrayal of ourselves?
Right.
How do we approach those situations with compassion,
Right.
both for ourselves and for the other person involved?
That's such an important question, and one that I think deserves its own deep dive.
I agree. We'll have to explore that another time.
For now, we encourage you to explore some of Gelong Thubten's techniques in your own life. Start with those micro moments of mindfulness. Practice meditating badly and see where this path of compassion leads you.
And remember, you don't have to be a monk to experience the transformative power of these practices.
We'll catch you next time on the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a question a lot of us struggle with.
It is. It really speaks to just how complex forgiveness can be.
It's not always a simple process. Right. Especially when we've experienced really deep hurt.
No, not at all. And, I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes forgiveness it might not be possible
Right.
or even advisable.
Yeah.
There are situations where prioritizing our own safety and well-being means, creating distance from the person who harmed us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We never want to minimize the pain someone has experienced or pressure them into forgiving before they're ready.
No, never.
So how do we approach those situations? The ones where forgiveness feels impossible, but we still want to cultivate compassion for ourselves and the other person. I think Thubten's teachings offer some really valuable insights here.
Yeah, I think so too. Remember how much he emphasized understanding the human condition? That we all act from a place of conditioning,
Right.
often driven by our own unresolved pain and trauma.
That idea that hurt people hurt people.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a powerful lens to apply,
Yeah.
even in the most difficult situations. Even if we can't condone the actions, we can at least try to understand the pain or confusion that might have led someone to act in a harmful way.
It doesn't excuse the behavior, but it can help us see the situation with more compassion.
Right. And I think in these situations, the internal aspect of compassion, the kindness we extend to ourselves, that becomes even more important.
Because it's easy to get caught in self-judgment,
Right.
blaming ourselves for not being able to just forgive.
Exactly. We might tell ourselves we should be over it by now, or that we're weak for still feeling hurt.
And that just adds another layer of suffering.
It does. Because I think the first step is offering ourselves compassion for whatever we're feeling. It's okay to be angry, to be hurt, to need space from the person who harmed us. We don't have to force ourselves to forgive before we're ready.
And I think it's important to remember that forgiveness is a process.
Yeah.
It's not a single event.
Absolutely. It can unfold in stages, and it might look different for each person. For some, forgiveness might lead to reconciliation, while for others, it might mean releasing the anger and resentment without necessarily re-engaging with the person.
And both of those paths are valid.
They are. Ultimately, the goal is to find a way to move forward without being tethered to the pain of the past.
And this is where I think Thubten's emphasis on mindfulness can be so helpful.
Oh, absolutely. By practicing those micro moments of awareness throughout the day, we can start to notice when we're getting caught in those negative thought patterns, those loops of anger or resentment.
Right. And instead of getting swept away, we can gently redirect our attention to the present moment.
Exactly. Choosing to focus on something positive, something life-affirming, instead of dwelling on the past.
This whole conversation has given me so much to think about. Compassion really does seem to be the key, no matter what path we choose.
I think so too. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for others, and recognizing our shared human experience.
It's about meeting the complexities of life with grace and understanding.
And remembering that even when forgiveness feels impossible, we can still choose compassion.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like we've all gained a deeper understanding of Gelong Thubten's wisdom and maybe even a bit more compassion for ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Gelong Thubten's world, and we encourage you to keep exploring the power of compassion and mindfulness in your own lives.
Until next time, keep diving deep.